Hello and welcome back to the Church of the Templar Mormon. This is Dr. Rick and I welcome you back. We've talked a lot about the Knights Templars and about how their beliefs and systems, I believe, were passed down through the Masons to America, and from them came to upstate New York and to the Smith family, and from there Joseph Smith learned of them and used these beliefs to start his church, the Mormon Church, and how I believe that many of his beliefs come from the Templars through the Masons. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what happened to the York Rite Masons, which Joseph Smith's family belonged to, and was very popular in upstate New York. I get most of my information from this book called Mormons, Masons, and Templars by Donald Goodlett. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I tried to check some of his sources. I wasn't able to find anything that directly related to what he was saying, but I did find stuff that touched on different elements that he has said. So, which leads me to believe that he's on track on what he's talking about. It is accepted in the academic community, several things that he has put forth in his book. And so I'm going to talk about that. And like I said, I get most of it from his book. Where Joseph Smith grew up, the York Rite Masons were very popular. But just like a couple of miles, according to Donald Goodlett, 2 miles from where Joseph Smith grew up, there was a man there, William Morgan. William Morgan is very famous in the Mason community, very infamous, I should say. He threatened to write a book exposing Masonry and exposing several of the rituals and oaths that they take. He disappeared. It is commonly believed, and it was at that time, that the Masons had kidnapped him and killed him for threatening to expose their secret rituals and signs and passwords and things like this. Let's say that, did William Morgan have anything to do with Joseph Smith? Did Joseph Smith know about William Morgan? I'm sure he knew about the controversy during that time about his disappearance. And the thing that makes me think that there was probably more of a connection than historians let on is the fact that William Morgan's wife joined the Mormon Church after his death, and she moved to Nauvoo and lived in Nauvoo, and it is alleged that she was one of Joseph Smith's plural wives. She did have her own husband there in Nauvoo, like many of the plural wives, which we'll talk about in another video. But if you go online to Wikipedia and find a list of Joseph Smith's plural wives, she's on there. She's number 3. And the those that accept Joseph Smith as a polygamist believe that she was one of his polygamous wives. Now, after William Morgan disappeared and presumed dead, there was a big anti-Mason movement that went on in America and in upstate New York specifically, but in America generally. They captured many Masons, they arrested many Masons, I should say, and tried to try them, but nobody would admit to knowing anything. They were not able to convict anybody. But there was an anti-Mason party that grew up in this country after this event. And it was like a third party along with the Whigs and the Democrats. It only lasted a few years, but there was a large anti-Mason sentiment in the United States at that time, and it was hard for anybody to come out as Masons. Many Masons went underground, as is mentioned in the book, Mormons, Masons, and Templars. Donald doesn't believe that you could have found a dozen people who would have admitted to being Masons at that time. It was a very strong anti-Mason sentiment at this time. And this was the same time that Joseph Smith was creating his church. I believe he disappeared like 2 years before the church was formed in 1830, 2 or 3 years. And of course, many of the people who formed the Mormon Church, he had to have 6 people sign his incorporation as a church. They were all Masons. Many of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon were all Masons. Like I've mentioned before, many of the early members of the Mormon Church were Masons. And many of the leaders, including Brigham Young, were Masons. It seemed to attract a lot of Masons to the Mormon Church when it first started. And being the fact, in my belief, being the fact that there was a vacuum caused by William Morgan in Masonry, people couldn't come out openly as Masons or meet openly. They could, under the Mormon Church, meet together and discuss many things that are that the Masons believed, the Mormons also believed. Also, around this time, there was a change in the whole structure of the York Rite Masons. Up until this time, the York Rite Masons, their Grand Master, was always a Sinclair. It was a hereditary office, passed from father to son. Started with the Sinclair who built Rosalind Chapel in Scotland. Included the Sinclair that supposedly came to America before Columbus. I think it was like 100 years before Columbus. He supposedly had come to America and hid maybe Templar and Mason treasures and secrets here in America. And of course referred to America as the New Jerusalem, and considered America a special place which God had saved for the Masons and the Templars, and this is also a belief of the Mormons. And of course, the United States was greatly influenced by the Masons and the Mormons. And like I've said before, George Washington was a York Rite Mason. So anyway, this had been a father to son through the Sinclair family. So around this time, the King of England, who was also a Mason, he said to be the leader or the head of the York Rite Masons. He took over, and he probably said, you know, I'm the king, I'm not going to be subject to anybody else, you know, so I'm in charge. And basically, he got together with his cousin, the Kaiser of Germany, and said, we're tired of this division within the Masonic movement. So we're going to join them together. We're going to join the Scottish Rite and the York Rite Masons together. And he created the United Lodge, which is still in London. I think it's the largest lodge in England. And he essentially did away with the York Rite Masons, and they became part of them, and the Scottish Rite became a part of one big Masonic group under the United Lodge. So when Masonry started back up again in America and started to become popular again, it was the Scottish Rite Masons who became popular. And if you go around, it's mainly the Scottish Rite Masons that you see. If you go to Washington, D.C., there's a large Scottish Rite lodge just a couple of blocks, I think, from the White House. It took over, basically, in America. Of course, they were always in America, but they were basically the main group now in America after this. And it is my belief, after reading this book, and I hope I relayed the facts correctly, it is my belief, after reading this book, Mormons, Masons, and Templars, that Mormonism came through the York Rite Masons from the Templars. Their beliefs were Mason beliefs and Templar beliefs, and it's also the belief of this Donald Goodlett that the Book of Mormon was a Masonic book, and that Joseph Smith kind of Christianized and published, which is one of the reasons why the Masonic groups were upset with Joseph Smith. And we'll talk more about that in another video. So I'd like to thank you for watching my video. I hope you subscribe, and you're more than welcome to donate to my ministry here to keep these videos coming. And I'd like to hear your comments. Certainly leave comments and tell me what you think and any suggestions or topics you'd like me to cover. And so until my next video, I bid you adieu.